Obandes. They had grown accustomed to the child at the gate, the silhouette at dusk, the patient stillness of something that had been standing there since 1923. They had stopped going to the gate, simply acknowledged it from the window, until the morning the gate was open and the child was not there. They searched the garden, the path, the house, found nothing, until that evening when he looked up from his reading and the child was standing in the doorway of the main room, simply closer than it had ever been. Find Chapter 1, 139. First, it is time for Chapter 165. They had made their peace with the gate, with the child at dusk, with the particular presence of something that had been watching from the same position since 1923 and had never moved closer. The accommodation had taken time, but it had been made. The child at the gate had become, over the months they lived there, simply a feature of the house, like the way the floorboards settled at night, like the particular quality of evening light through the garden, simply there. And then one morning it wasn't, and the gate was open, and everything the accommodation had been built on, the distance, the gate, the staying outside, was no longer what it had been. The couple had been living in the house for nearly 2 years when the morning came that the gate was open. He noticed it first, standing at the kitchen window with his morning tea, looking out at the garden as he did most mornings, and registering that the gate at the end of the garden path was standing open, both sides, the fenneck open completely. He set down his tea, went to the back door, looked out. The garden was as it always was, the path, the trees, the gate now open at the end of it. The child was not at the gate. He stood in the back doorway for a moment, then called to his wife. They searched the garden together, then the path beyond the gate, then the house. Found nothing. Went about their day with the particular unease of people who have had a routine disturbed without understanding why. The day passed without incident. He worked, she worked. They went about the ordinary things of an ordinary day with the awareness, not discussed, simply present between them, that the child had not been at the gate that evening. He checked at dusk. The gate was still open. The gate's usual position, occupied, was simply the garden path, empty. He closed the gate, went back inside. They ate. He read in the main room while she worked at the table. The evening was quiet in the way evenings in that house were quiet. He had been reading for perhaps an hour when he looked up from his book. If these stories have found their way to you, if you find yourself returning to this quiet room, there is something small you can do. Like and subscribe. It tells me, and whatever else watches from this room, that you were here and that you intend to find your way back. If you have a story of your own, Granny is always listening, watching, waiting. The child was standing in the doorway of the main room, the doorway that connected the main room to the hallway, standing very still in the particular stillness that had always been its quality at the gate. looking at him with the same patient expression, the same face he had seen at the gate at dusk for nearly 2 years, simply no longer at the gate, simply in the doorway of the main room of his house. He sat very still in his chair, the book in his hands, looking at the child in the doorway, the child looking back, the same patience on both sides, the same quality of two things regarding each other across a distance that had simply become smaller. Shock koi, not the room's temperature, the cold of understanding that the distance had changed and had not changed back. I wonder if something that had watched from your gate for 2 years was suddenly standing in your doorway, what would you do in that first moment of seeing it there? If you have a story of your own, this quiet room has space for your experiences too. Granny is always listening. He did not move, did not speak, simply sat in his chair and looked at the child in the doorway. The child did not move either, simply stood, with the patient quality of something that had learned to wait and had no particular urgency about what happened next. They remained like this for perhaps 5 minutes. Then his wife came into the main room from the kitchen, stopped, looked at the doorway. The child turned its head, slowly, with the deliberate quality of something that moves carefully and intentionally, and looked at her. She looked back, the three of them in the main room in the evening quiet. Then the child turned back to him and took one step into the room. You are still here. Good. Some stories need a witness all the way to the end. I wonder, when the child stepped into the room, what do you think it wanted? His wife sat down, not from fear exactly, from the particular decision of someone who has assessed a situation and determined that sitting is the appropriate response. The child stood just inside the doorway, one step in, looking between them with the same patient attention it had given the house from the gate for 2 years. Then it did something it had never done at the gate. It sat down, on the floor just inside the doorway, with the particular settling of a child making itself comfortable in a space it intends to occupy for a while. They sat in the main room. The child sat in the doorway. The evening continued. Nobody spoke. Eventually they went to bed. In the morning the doorway was empty. The gate was closed. The child was at the gate at dusk, as it had always been, as though the evening had not happened, or had happened exactly as intended. I think about what it means to move closer. The child at the gate had maintained its position for nearly 100 years before the evening it stood in the doorway. Whatever had kept it at the gate, whatever understanding or agreement or simply habit of a century, had shifted, and it had moved closer, not threateningly, simply closer, sitting on the floor of the doorway with the settling quality of something making itself comfortable in a new position, and then returning to the gate the following evening as though nothing had changed. But something had changed. The gate was no longer the boundary it had been. The house knew this. The couple knew this. And the child, patient still, watching with the same expression it had always had simply demonstrated it. Duh. Some things move closer when they are ready. I have found this to be true of more things than gates. Another whispered story from Japan, shared quietly here beside the kotatsu. If you have grown accustomed to something watching from your gate, if the distance and the boundary and the staying outside have become the terms of your accommodation, pay attention to the morning the gate is open. Check the garden, check the path, go about your day if nothing is found. But when evening comes and you look up from your reading, look at the doorway first, because the gate being open was not an accident, and the child that was not at the gate was not gone, simply elsewhere, working out something about the distance and the boundary, and whether the staying outside was still what it intended to do. One step inside the doorway, sitting on the floor with the settling of something making itself comfortable in a new position, and back at the gate the following evening, as though to say, I can, and now you know I can, and we will see what comes next. If this story stayed with you, if the dark or the shadow feels a little closer tonight, you know where to find me. I am always here beside the kotatsu, watching, waiting. And if you wish others to find their way here too, there is something small you can do. Like and subscribe. I would not object. And if you have a story of your own, this quiet room has space for your experiences too. Granny is always listening.